and welcome to Rubbin Minds. My name is Isabella Adediji, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to Rubbin Minds. It's been 8 years of the President Muhammadu Buhari-led administration, and we are looking forward to a new administration led by the president-elect Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. For 8 years, we've been promised change and next level. And we go down memory lane and see how well this administration delivered on change and the next level. Joining me in the studio is a legal practitioner, Adiola Onikoyi. Welcome to Rubbin Minds.
Thank you for having me.
So 8 years of President Muhammadu Buhari, do you believe this administration delivered on change and taking us to the next level?
That's a difficult one, to be honest. Change depends on what type of change we're talking about, right? Some would say change for the better. Some would look at things like infrastructure. Some would look at things in the agriculture sector too and say, you know, things have changed for the better in the country. While others would look at things like unity in the country, others would look at things like security and say maybe things have not changed for the better in the country. So it depends on how you look at it.
I think if you're looking at change, the administration came in promising change in terms of corruption, in terms of security, and obviously the economy. And we're looking at an administration that's had to deal with security issues year in, year out. We have insurgency, we have clashes between herdsmen and farmers. Yes. So in terms of change, I know they were promising positive change. If you were to put a figure in grading this administration, say 100% being the highest,
right,
what would you give it?
Another tough question. 100%. 100% being the highest, right? I would put it in the middle, right? I would put it in the middle.
So 50% means a pass mark. So you give this administration a pass mark?
Overall.
So let's look at security. How well has this administration done?
Well, security is one of the ones that would bring the scores down because earlier on it got worse. We can't say with terms with, when we're talking about Boko Haram, it has gotten better when we're talking about Boko Haram, but then again, other security threats have come up. And those ones, this government seems not to be able to get a grasp on them. So we're talking about what's going on in the East, what's going on in the Middle East, clashes herdsmen and farmers, as you said. So I think, no, when it comes to security, I don't think this government has done so well.
Okay, let's move to the economy. I think there was a time when Nigerians almost had made up their minds that, look, the dollar might go up to 1,000 naira.
Yes.
And they'd already accepted that reality. How well has this government done in attracting foreign direct investments, in growing the economy, and even reducing the debt profile?
Right. So the debt profile one, I think that one has gone out of control now. To be honest, I think it's gone out of control now. We just keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. And the government agencies keep telling us that borrowing is not so bad, right? If you're doing something with it, and we shouldn't worry about the debt to GDP ratio and stuff like that.
And do you feel that the monies being borrowed are used
judiciously? No, I do not believe so, because if they were, we would see the effects right now. Now, as I said earlier on, we could talk about infrastructure, right? And some would say this government has laid very strong foundations there. And, you know, we should also not forget COVID, right? COVID really impacted the economy, not just in Nigeria, but around the world. But then again, those still sort of sound like excuses at the end of the day. If you come in promising heaven and everything that this government promised and you fail to deliver not even up to 40% of it when it comes to the economy.
I mean,
then
Nigeria
questions
is
need to
being
be
considered
asked.
as the poverty capital of
the world right now, yes.
So we're looking at millions who are impoverished, there are
Yes.
no jobs, and
Yes.
unemployment is on the rise.
Yes.
And even the cost of food and basic services have gone up. So there's a lot of inflation. And I know you pointed out that this is a worldwide thing, but how well has this government been able to react to all these changes?
Right. So I think if this government was more, in my opinion, if they were more coordinated, right, if the policies were more coordinated, if we're not hearing a different thing from the finance minister and the CBN governor and, the budget minister and all of these important ministries, if they do not coordinate, what we have is what we would have, right? We seem to have forgotten the shambolic Naira thing that happened in the past, right?
No, we haven't forgotten it. I mean,
because it seems
the Naira, there was a
when was the last
scarcity
time
of
you
the
saw a new note?
Naira.
When was the last time you saw a new note?
Maybe probably in April.
Exactly.
And I've just been seeing the old notes. I mean,
right
we
now.
were buying money.
It seemed it was needless, right? It seemed there was no need for that, but that further pushed a lot of Nigerians into poverty. For what reason? Right, so the uncoordinated way this government has done the economy, I believe, yes, it's part of the reason why we're where we are.
Okay, we've looked at security, we've looked at the economy. I think the next one we'll look at is representation.
Right.
So there's been that clamor for more young people to get involved in politics. Not too young to run was very big. And then also inclusivity in terms of females. So having more women in decision-making positions. How well has this government done in ensuring there's more representation, not just in the federal level, but across the local, state, and federal level? Right.
So I think the passing of the bills were a good thing in and of themselves, right? I think the encouragement that has been given to young people to run, slashing the fees, same thing with women, slashing the fees for nomination forms and contesting and things like that. Good steps, right? But at the end of the day, we still live in a society where it takes a lot of money to run elections. And young people do not have that kind of election money. That's the truth. And so there is still an imbalance there. And until we do something about money in our politics, not too young to run, a fantastic idea, but it would still be a dream because we would get young people who would, get elected into positions. But you also have to then look at the background of how some of these young people got into this.
So you're looking at godfatherism, godmotherism,
tokenism, right?
Tokenism.
Being a matter of, okay, you're a young person, people have been clamoring for, young people to run, just go ahead. You're the son of somebody, but just go ahead.
So do you feel that those people that end up in elected positions as a result of a godfather or tokenism or godmother, they're mere puppets and they have to give back to their benefactors?
It's going to be hard not to be a puppet. I would assume, I don't know any one of them, but I would assume the mentality would be, let's just get there and, I would do the good I would do. But at the end of the day, if the reason you got there is not of your own volition, is not from the people's support of you, right? It's because someone backed you. That person is holding you there. And so if you want to stay there, you would want to do what the person wants. And so, yes, I believe it affects the way some of these young people act. And we have seen it in our politics, both at the legislature level and the executive level.
Okay, now let's move to infrastructure. I know this administration is very big on some of the gains they've made in terms of building of roads, development of the rail infrastructure, and a lot of monies have been going into that. Early on in this administration, there was the excuse of, we've inherited a huge problem from the earlier administration, and they were just trying to sort of get their heads wrapped around that. But now they've come out to say, well, we've made some improvements in infrastructure. How well will you rate the growth in that sector?
In that sector, I think it's, as they keep telling us and reminding us over and over again, it's one of the biggest achievements of this government, infrastructure. So kudos to the government on that. Some would question the amount of money spent on these infrastructure projects, but at least there's something there. And infrastructure is the bedrock, it's the backbone of every economy, right? just the mere fact of you investing in infrastructure creates jobs, and the long-term investment of having viable infrastructure in a country pays for itself in the long term. So that is good. They've done well with that. So I would say yes, they've done well with that.
But if this infrastructure is there and is meant to create jobs and to stimulate the economy and attract, say, foreign direct investment, why do we see increasing numbers of people going abroad to seek better fortunes? I mean, the whole jackpot phenomenon has become a thing. And I know each and every one of us knows someone who has ended up going either to Canada, the United States, to England. So why isn't there infrastructure development enough to retain this talent? And what effect will it have in the long term, having our doctors abroad, for example, having a lot of our skilled personnel all migrating? Right.
So when it comes to the jackpot phenomenon, I think we have to look at it in sorts of different case scenarios, right? Because people tend to just generalize and put it all down to people want to leave this country because the country is bad. Yes, people do. But you talked about doctors right now, for example. The reason for that is simple: pay. Right. If you have the opportunity to go somewhere where you would be paid more, where you would be respected more, you would go there. When you talk about a lot of young people, education, you know, how many young people would want to stay behind in a country where the schools can shut down at any moment and go that way for 2-3 years, you know, disrupting entire lives? For what reason? And so people would want to go abroad for that. And so there are different reasons for people wanting to go. And so we need to realize that. But of course, yes, if the economy were better, people would want to stay.
Okay. You're saying looking at jackpot in different cases. So if we look at the medical situation, I know there was a bill, quite controversial, that came up in the news about having to force them to stay back, to give back to their country, maybe based on just how much or how cheap it is to get a medical degree here, compared to, say, the United States, where you would first study something for 4 years before the main. Yes. So do you think that's the kind of response that will address this issue while the pay gets better, the infrastructure is there, the education system gets better?
Yes. You know, it's funny that the National Assembly will bring up that bill, because every time we talk about medical tourism, right, and the elites traveling abroad, they seem not to want to come forward with the bill that would stop them and their children from going abroad to seek medical help, but they want to stop our brightest minds from going outside the country to seek, you know, better lives for themselves. I think that's a bit hypocritical, right? And so that just shows where the minds of the people who have brought up such bills are. It's not a solution to anything. It's not a solution to anything. It doesn't. I don't even think it would be constitutional, you know, stopping the freedom of movement of people just because they're medical doctors. It's nothing.
Interesting you should raise the issue of education again. Some would say that there's been a huge emphasis on university education. Do you think this administration has done more to create more kinds of institutions, say your technical institutions, vocational studies, different pathways into the job market?
Right. I think they've attempted to. I think they've attempted to. At the same time, we've also seen a sort of trend where state governments are beginning to convert technical colleges and the likes into universities, right? Almost as if we don't need technical colleges, and we do. So the government's investment in those technical colleges, yes, I think that's good. But then again, are we going to run into the same sort of troubles we've had with the universities, right? Are we going to have the same sort of funding issues? Are we going to have the same sort of lack of proper equipment? Because when we're talking of technical education, you need proper equipment. It's not just books and paper and stuff. You need proper equipment. So how is that going to be provided for these institutions, these new institutes and the like? So we need to watch out for that. And going by Nigerian government's track record, I'm not optimistic.
So earlier in this conversation, you said you give this administration a 50% or a pass mark.
Yes.
And one of the biggest
things... I'm beginning to rethink that now.
One of the biggest things that came out is the infrastructure. But beyond infrastructure, where else will you say this administration has shone through and has delivered on its promise of positive change and taking Nigerians to the next level?
I think the administration has tried in agriculture. I think they've attempted to improve our food production. I don't think shutting down the border was a solution to it. Once again, mismatched policies. But I think the ramp up of grants and loans and the likes and access to capital that they've given farmers, I think that has been a positive aspect.
But are we seeing that translate into, say, food prices? I mean,
no,
are we seeing that translate into more people going into agriculture?
Because at the sorry to interrupt you. So at the end of the day, right, agriculture is there, but then again, you have farmers who have had access to capital, have produced the foods. Now to get the food from the farm to the market, we still have the bad roads, right? We still have the network links, the transport links that do not really connect. And so that also affects the price of the goods. Insecurity affects the price of the goods, right? So they've done well in that.
How well have they done in even generating revenue through agriculture?
Through agriculture.
In terms of, I mean, the color of the flag is green, and
Yes.
we were taught in primary school that represented agriculture. So one would think...
It seems we've gone back to the old ways of seeing oil as it, right? The government does the right things. They say the right things about green policy and the likes, but the policy that we've seen over the last couple of years has been, yes, let's invest in agriculture and let's give farmers, it's almost like let's give farmers a lot of money, let them handle it, right? While we concentrate on this huge thing, which is our oil, and try and ramp up production, Dangote refinery, getting online and all that, try and create more wealth through that oil.
So you want to see the government invest across the value chain? We're looking at distribution, we're looking at export, we're looking at processing, not just making grants and loans available.
Because at the end of the day, these grants and loans have become subject to a lot of corruption. Right, and we've seen a lot of stories of farmers borrowing a lot of money, not returning it, and seeing it as, you know, their own share of the national cake. So, you know.
And corruption has always been a big issue. Every administration promises to deal with corruption. Do you think President Muhammadu Buhari dealt with corruption?
No, I don't. The cases are there for to see.
Do you think it's his fault, or it's maybe just how slow our judicial system is, or it's a number of factors?
It's a number of factors, but I think we're always getting told to watch the president's body language. I think the president's body language on corruption has been mixed, right? You know, the things he said about one of the most corrupt men in the history of this country, where, you know, the man we keep receiving credit a lot from overseas, and, you know, the president had very nice words to say about him. I think the president's body language has been mixed. I think the EFCC has been doing well, but I think they've been more they've been concentrating more on small fry, right? They've been going after Yahoo boys here and there, and, you know, the big politicians that are staring us in the face, even the ones with video evidence, they seem not to be able to do anything about it. So it's a mixed match, but overall, I don't think this government's done well with corruption now.
Finally, what does this new administration that we're about to usher in, I mean, they're promising renewed hope to Nigerians, but what do they need to do to turn things around for the fortunes of this country? I mean, we grew up believing that Nigeria is the giant of Africa, but by economic standards, by living standards, GDP, there's so many standards that we're just not measuring up.
No, we're not.
And we're not realizing our full potential. So what does this incoming administration need to do to ensure that Nigerians get what they've been promised?
Right. So I always talk about the economy, right? I always say you need to concentrate on the economy, because the economy is doing well, things will come along, right? And that is one of our biggest problems right now. We need our economy to be kickstarted. It seems almost as if the country is in a lull, right? We're just in a waiting period, you know, between the old administration and the new administration. So if the new administration is coming in, they need to start quickly. They need to get the economic team assembled quite quickly, unlike this outgoing administration, so we can know the direction they're going, and they need to get moving on, you know, making the sort of pronouncements and announcements and policy decisions that the international community would look at and say, you know, Nigeria would be a good place to invest in again. And also security, right? It's been the bane on every government's neck for the past number of years, and so the incoming president has to deal with the farmer herder crisis immediately, because it is getting worse right now. It seemed as if during the election the whole thing stalled, but right after the election it's gotten far worse, and I think the scale of it is far more than even the media knows, and his media is allowed to report, because I know there's some self-censorship. So the incoming government needs to concentrate on that, security and the economy, and I think we can kickstart from there.
And what about engaging the citizenry? Some will say that there's a lot of dissatisfaction that has been felt by a lot of the young people who came out to vote and maybe were denied the opportunities to cast their vote, or don't believe in the strength, or like say the work that INEC carried out in the past election. What must this government be doing to reduce voter apathy? We saw the numbers drop between the federal, the general elections and the state elections.
The state ones, yes. So if you're a government and you come in with no legitimacy from the people, you would find it hard to govern. So this government needs to find legitimacy amongst the people. Right now, it's dicey, right? Because there are lots of dissatisfied young people out there. And so the government needs to signal to young people, to young Nigerians, that it's coming in not with any sort of preconceived mindset. Right, it's coming in with open arms. It's coming in willing to listen to ideas, because at the end of the day, whatever party you support, what you want is a better country for yourself and your children at the end of the day. And so if this government comes in and says, you know what, we're open to listen to ideas from all sides, let's sit down together, I think that will go a long way.
Indeed, a government that listens, I think, is representative of the democracy that we so desire in Nigeria. Thank you very much, Adiola Onikoyi, for your contributions on Rubbin Minds. We'll go for a quick break on Rubbin Minds. Do join us again.